When people think of Santa Claus, they often picture a jolly old man rather than a massive roadside display that ended in tragedy. In December 1953, Dallas residents spotted a giant Santa atop Porter Chevrolet, cradling a full-sized Chevy. Created by Jack Bridges, known for Big Tex at the State Fair of Texas, the display aimed to boost holiday sales. Unfortunately, a publicity stunt turned tragic when Roy V. Davis fell to his death. While the giant Santa is still a notable sight, the story behind it has largely faded from memory. Building a giant Santa. Long before the incident that would shake a local community, the idea to place a giant Santa Claus atop a car dealership seemed like a stroke of marketing genius. In the fall of 1953, Porter Chevrolet, located at 5526 East Mockingbird Lane, directly across from the Dr. Pepper plant, wanted to do something bold to stand out during the holiday shopping rush. They turned to Jack Bridges, an artist and fabricator who was already well known in Texas, for transforming a giant Santa into the now iconic Big Tex. Bridges was a logical choice. His experience in creating enormous figures made him the go-to man for such an outlandish project. The dealership commissioned Bridges to build what would become an 85-foot Santa Claus, if standing upright. Since this Santa was going to be seated, that height was somewhat compressed, but the figure was still gargantuan. He was designed to sit on the dealership's roof, his legs dangling over the edge, and he would hold an actual 1954 Chevrolet sedan on his lap, as if it were a Christmas present. The spectacle was meant to turn heads and draw customers in, and it certainly did. Passerbys marveled at the sight of the colossal Kris Kringle, who loomed over Mockingbird Lane like a holiday deity. News outlets from across the country picked up the story, drawn in by the sheer audacity of it all. The engineering challenges were enormous. Bridges and a team of 11 assistants worked around the clock for nearly 2 months, constructing the Santa from steel and papier-mâché. The project had to be assembled in pieces because no truck in Dallas was big enough to transport the entire structure. The torso was placed on wheels and hauled separately, while the head, arms, legs, and boots were delivered in smaller sections. Each boot, it was said, would line up with the roof of the building. Assembling Santa on site required cranes, crews, and careful coordination. By December 9th, the final piece, the head, was hoisted onto place. Once completed, the figure quickly became a local sensation. Children and adults alike made the trek to Porter Chevrolet to witness the holiday marvel. Parents took photos of their kids standing in front of Santa's massive boots, while others simply gawked at the sight. The dealership had achieved exactly what it set out to do: dominate the Christmas scene in Dallas with an unforgettable piece of seasonal advertising. The fatal fall of Roy Davis. On December 10, 1953, the atmosphere around Porter Chevrolet shifted from festive to horrifying. Roy V. Davis, a 46-year-old superintendent for the F.S. Old Company, the firm responsible for operating the crane used in the Santa installation, returned to the dealership for what he hoped would be a joyful moment. Davis, who had been hospitalized recently for a heart condition, was still under medical advisement to take it easy. But he was determined to snap a memorable photo for his family's Christmas card, one of himself dangling beside the giant Santa Claus in the crane he had helped supervise. With his employer's reluctant permission, Davis commandeered one of the cranes and was lifted up to the side of the towering figure. As photographers captured the moment, Davis appeared relaxed, smiling for the camera. Witnesses later told police everything seemed fine until it wasn't. While he was being lowered, he suddenly slumped over, and the scene took a horrifying turn. He lost his grip and plummeted 35 feet to the concrete below, landing between the giant boots of Santa Claus. The scene, once filled with laughter and camera flashes, now became a tableau of disbelief and panic. Photographers and onlookers ran toward Davis, but it was too late. He had suffered what was later confirmed as a myocardial rupture, a catastrophic complication tied to his heart condition. The tragic irony of the situation, the image of a man falling to his death beneath a smiling, oversized Santa Claus, was not lost on those present. Jack Bridges, the artist who created the massive display, was visibly shaken and was even seen helping place Davis onto the stretcher. The footage of the aftermath, captured by WBAP-TV, is chilling. Blood stains the pavement, a stretcher is rushed in, and the once playful tone of the event collapses under the weight of a real and sudden loss. News of Davis's death was front-page material the next day. The Associated Press picked up the story, and newspapers in Texas and beyond reported the details with a mixture of awe and somber reflection. Yet, despite the widespread coverage on December 11th, the story faded almost immediately. By December 17th, when columnist Paul Kroom mentioned the giant Santa in his popular Big D column, there was no mention of Roy Davis or the tragedy that had occurred mere days later. A holiday spectacle in shadow. In the days following Davis's death, the giant Santa Claus remained exactly where he was, perched atop Porter Chevrolet, arms locked around the 1954 Chevy sedan in his lap. The dealership made no visible effort to remove or modify the display, and despite the fatal accident that had just occurred beneath it, families continued to visit and take pictures. In fact, newspaper photos taken days later show smiling children gazing up at Santa unaware or perhaps unconcerned about the grim event that had recently unfolded. There was no public memorial at the dealership, no sign to mark the event. The dealership kept operating, and the Santa remained in place throughout the rest of the holiday season. The structure had cost too much time and money to dismantle early, and perhaps there was hope that the incident would quietly fade from memory. In a way, it did. For decades, the story of Roy Davis's death slipped into obscurity. Locals remembered the giant Santa, especially those who had been children at the time, but few recalled or even knew the grim story behind it. As odd as it may seem, the blending of commercial spectacle and personal tragedy was not entirely out of step with mid-century America's view of public relations. Businesses often sidestepped bad publicity by simply moving forward and changing the narrative. There were no press conferences, no investigations into safety procedures. By modern standards, the lack of public reaction seems cold, but in the 1950s, companies had a very different relationship with media scrutiny. Tragedies, especially those not caused by corporate negligence, were more easily brushed aside. Adding to the surreal nature of the story is how the surrounding area continued to change and evolve while the memory of the incident remained buried. The dealership at 5526 Mockingbird is long gone, replaced with businesses like Campese's and other establishments near the former Dr. Pepper plant. Yet those who dig into Dallas history will find the image of that colossal Santa and the untold story that shadowed it, and it offers a strange glimpse into how cities remember then forget their past. Now it's time to hear from you. Had you ever heard of the Porter Chevrolet Santa disaster before today? Let us know in the comment section below.